All right, let's kick off this deep dive. And it's going to be a little different this time.
Oh.
Yeah, we're doing a little research for, our own show, the Latin Metal Cruise Show.
Okay.
We're going to be featuring Holy Wars, The Punishment Due by Megadeth.
Oh, classic.
Yeah, it needs no introduction. But before we do that, thought we'd take a little deep dive into the song itself.
I mean, it's a metal masterpiece for sure, but knowing the story behind it, it's going to make it hit that much harder for our listeners,
Absolutely. So let's go back in time a little bit. 1988, Megadeth, they're playing a show in Northern Ireland.
Oh, yeah.
And this is, tensions are high there anyway, right?
Right.
And you've got Dave Mustaine, the frontman, who maybe doesn't fully grasp the cause situation with the IRA.
Yeah, I mean, he saw these bootleg Megadeth shirts with the cause on them being sold, and he, decided to dedicate a Sex Pistols cover to it on stage, not realizing, of course, what that phrase really meant, in Northern Ireland.
Like the depth of what that meant.
The political, the violent implications, all of that.
So what happened?
Well, the crowd, they didn't take it. Well, let's just say it wasn't received as intended.
Not a good look.
Yeah, they erupted, full-blown riot, and the band had to, make a run for it. They escaped in a bulletproof bus.
Wow, can you imagine being on that bus?
I mean, talk about a story to tell later, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's almost funny looking back on it now, but for Mustaine at the time, it was a serious wake-up call.
Absolutely.
And that experience, that chaos, that fear, I mean, it poured directly into Holy Wars.
It's amazing how, what could have been a disaster turned into this iconic song,
Wow. And speaking of iconic, we got to talk about the structure of this thing. Holy Wars isn't your average thrash anthem. It's like 2 songs in one.
Yeah. You got that furious, relentless first part, the Holy Wars proper. And then after that incredible acoustic bridge by Marty Friedman, it just slams into the Punishment Due, which is just heavier and slower.
I love that shift. It's so masterful how it goes from this pure sonic chaos into this cold, calculated heaviness.
Yeah, it's the music itself is mirroring the lyrics, going from the heat of battle to the grim aftermath.
Exactly. And that's what makes Holy Wars so unique. It's not just about aggression.
No.
It's about the consequences, the weight of it all.
Right.
The weight of violence, the cost of it.
And speaking of the lyrics, I mean, they tackle some heavy themes, right? We're talking religious conflict, warmongering, blind faith, the whole 9 yards.
Yeah, Mustaine's not holding back. He's going straight for the hypocrisy, those who use religion as a weapon to justify violence and division.
And it's interesting because the song came out in the late 80s, right when the whole Gulf War thing was starting to brew.
Yeah, right on the cusp of it all.
And of course, you've got the backdrop of the ongoing conflict in the Middle East. So these themes of war and religious conflict, they were everywhere. Very much in the air, yeah. And that's probably a big reason why the song resonated so strongly with people back then. It just tapped into a very real and present fear that everyone was feeling.
Absolutely, and honestly.
Yeah, and it still resonates today, right? I mean, the world's changed in so many ways, but those themes, that conflict, the religious tension, it's still there.
Sadly, yeah. It's like Mustaine was writing about today's headlines, almost scary how relevant it still feels.
That's what makes a song like this so powerful. It transcends its time, speaks to something deeper.
To something about the human condition, yeah.
Exactly.
Okay, but here's where it gets really interesting for us, right? We're bringing Holy Wars to the Latin Metal Cruise Show. And I'm curious how it's going to land with our audience. What do you think?
That's a great question. Latin America has a complicated relationship with religion, especially Catholicism.
Right.
And then you've got the history of political turmoil, revolutions, dictatorships, all of that.
Yeah, it's a lot to unpack.
It all feeds into the cultural landscape. So while the song's themes are universal, they might hit a little differently for listeners who've experienced those things firsthand.
Like more personally, you're saying?
Yeah, I think they'll connect with that anger, that frustration with hypocrisy, with those who exploit faith for power. That feeling transcends borders, I think.
Yeah, it's a universal emotion for sure. And musically, I mean, Holy Wars is just so intense. Those riffs, the drumming, the way it shifts between pure thrash and those almost doom metal sections. It's
powerful stuff.
I'm wondering how that's going to play with Latin metal fans who are used to rhythms and influences.
Well, Latin metal is incredibly diverse, right? You got everything from Brazilian thrash to bands that incorporate folk elements, indigenous rhythms, even classical influences.
Some variety, yeah.
A lot of different flavors.
But I think Holy Wars has this raw energy that can connect with anyone who loves heavy music.
Absolutely. It's a song that demands to be felt, not just heard.
Agreed. Now, before we go, there's one more thing we have to mention. It might surprise you. The punishment due. The second part of the song, it's actually inspired by a Marvel comic book character.
Oh, yeah, that's right. The Punisher, this dark, brooding vigilante who takes justice into his own hands, often with brutal results.
Yeah, not exactly a subtle guy.
Definitely not.
It's fascinating how Mustaine connects this fictional character to the very real themes of the song, you know?
Yeah.
It's like he's using the Punisher as a symbol for the darker side of humanity, that urge for vengeance and retribution.
That need to take things into your own hands.
Right. And that brings up an interesting question. How will a song like Holy Wars, with its complex themes and challenging lyrics, translate to the Latin metal scene?
It's a good question, you know? Latin America has its own unique history with violence, with the struggle for justice. I'm really curious to see how our listeners will interpret those themes.
Yeah, will they see the Punisher as a hero,
Hmm.
a vigilante fighting against corruption?
Yeah.
Or will they be more critical of his methods, his embrace of violence?
I think there's room for both interpretations, and that's what makes this deep dive so exciting. We're not just presenting a song, we're opening up a space for dialogue, for different perspectives.
Exactly. We want to hear from our listeners. How does Holy Wars speak to them, to their own experiences and beliefs?
Let's make this a real deep dive together.
It's going to be fascinating to see how it resonates with a Latin American audience.
And that's the beauty of music, isn't it? It transcends borders, languages, cultures. It can bring people together and spark conversations that might not have happened otherwise.
I bet some listeners out there are thinking, why are these Latin metal crew folks so hung up on this one Megadeth song?
Well, you know, it's more than just liking a band or a track. Holy Wars is kind of a cultural touchstone, and really getting into it is going to make it hit harder for everyone listening.
It's not just about the headbanging, though there will be a lot of that. It's about understanding it, the message, and how it all connects back to Latin metal specifically.
Think of it like this. We've all heard the saying, those who can't remember the past are doomed to repeat it. Well, music can help us remember, but it can also make us rethink things.
And Holy Wars brings up some tough questions, about religion, violence, who's really benefiting from all the conflict in the world. Not easy topics, especially for a region that's seen so much of both.
Definitely, but we're not afraid to go there, with our listeners. In fact, we're feeling it starts some interesting conversations.
Latin metal fans are definitely passionate, so we're really excited to see how they react to Holy Wars.
It's a song that can really make you think, make you feel, and maybe even challenge some of your own beliefs. Who knows? Maybe it'll even inspire some new music.
That's always the hope. So everyone listening, get ready for Holy Wars, The Punishment Due, on an upcoming episode of the Latin Metal Cruise Show. We'll be getting into all the things we talked about today.
And we want you to be a part of it. Let us know what you think, how you see it, even your own connections to the song's themes.
Let's make this a real deep dive together.
Until then, keep it heavy.
Stay metal.